I didn't get quite as close to Toscanini ever as my son did in that moment. But then I wasn't a little boy with a red jacket, 5 years old. Maestro adored children, as you know.
The voice you have just heard was that of our intermission guest on this, the fifth program of NBC's new broadcast series, Toscanini, the man behind the legend. This is Ben Grauer. Welcome once again to music conducted by Arturo Toscanini and to another session with one of his many friends and colleagues as they paint word portraits of the man behind the legend, Arturo Toscanini. On this program, so near to American Independence Day, we have selected music performed by Maestro Toscanini and the NBC Symphony Orchestra, written by American composers. Included in our broadcast will be Gershwin's An American in Paris, three movements from 30 Grofe's Grand Canyon Suite, and our program begins in what is perhaps the most stirring of all American patriotic marches, as Arturo Toscanini conducts the NBC Symphony Orchestra in The Stars and Stripes Forever by John Philip Sousa. Arturo Toscanini and the NBC Symphony Orchestra have opened our concert of American music with The Stars and Stripes Forever by John Philip Sousa. During Maestro's career with both the New York Philharmonic and the NBC Symphony Orchestra, he performed a number of American scores. The music of Abram Chasins, Bernard Wagner, Ernest Schelling, and Howard Hanson was heard with the Philharmonic at Carnegie Hall, and with the NBC Symphony he included Aaron Copland, Samuel Barber, Paul Creston, Charles Griffiths, Henry Gilbert, Morton Gould, Don Gillis, G.T. Strong, Roy Harris, Charles Loeffler, Ely Siegmeister, Kent Kennan, Freddie Grofe, John Philip Sousa, and George Gershwin. Altogether, he played 3 works of Gershwin, the Rhapsody in Blue, the Concerto in F, and the work which we hear now, An American in Paris. George Gershwin's An American in Paris, with Arturo Toscanini conducting the NBC Symphony Orchestra, brings us to intermission time. Our program will resume following a 10-second pause for station identification. You are listening to Toscanini, the man behind the legend. And as is our custom at intermission time, we welcome to our NBC microphones another of the many friends and colleagues of Arturo Toscanini to hear personal recollections and memories of days spent in association with the maestro. Our guest now is the former producer of the NBC Symphony and the producer of this current series, Don Gillis. Don, we remember vividly those days in Studio 8H and in Carnegie Hall with exciting rehearsals and concerts. Of course, we also remember visits with Maestro at Riverdale and in his dressing room. But you had some special experience with him. I know you visited him in Italy, didn't you?
Well, I went over to do some recordings of some of my music. I went up to Milano to see him. And, by the way, I sort of casually invited him to come down to Rome to hear the orchestra, you know. One day, Ben, I was working with the orchestra, and I'm not a conductor as such. I'm a composer-type conductor. To put it mildly, things weren't going so well, and I tried this and I tried that, and nothing seemed to happen. Things just didn't gel, and I was about to give up altogether. And then something miraculous seemed to happen. The orchestra started playing. I thought, well, at last, I've gotten my point over to these men. It was just magnificent. They were playing perfectly, and I was reveling in this sound. And I happened to glance around over my shoulder, and there was Maestro sitting in the audience. They were playing for him, not me.
Just his presence in the auditorium, not on the podium.
And the minute we came to the last note of that particular piece, I didn't have to say intermission. They ran out and surrounded him, and he, of course, greeted them graciously, and many of them had played with him in the past. But this was a great experience. This is sort of the way he affected people, and I don't think he knew ever that he had this effect on people.
That's what made it so heartwarming and charming.
Yes,
that he had no sense of his own.
It's a complete embracing of humanity, so much so that one felt, privileged to be spoken to. And we hear so many stories by all of those who have been connected with Toscanini, some deification of, as they respected him as a great musician. As a man, I recall the day, one Thanksgiving day, my son, then about 5 years old, came down to rehearsal. He had on a bright red jacket, and Maestro loved red, as you know. And so after the rehearsal, Walter came in the control room, and he said, "You're missing something?" And I looked around, and yes, I was missing something. My son was gone. He said, "Well, come with me. He's in with Father." And I thought, oh, boy, this is the end of me. Well, quite the contrary. I went into the dressing room, and there was my son sitting in Maestro Toscanini's lap. They were having the greatest time talking back and forth. Well, I didn't get quite as close to Toscanini ever as my son did in that moment. But then I wasn't a little boy with a red jacket, 5 years old. Maestro adored children, as you know.
Well, Don, we speak to you as the producer of our broadcast with Toscanini, but you on your own as Don Gillis, American composer, had what must have been a very great thrill and experience to have one of your symphonies performed by Maestro.
Yes, it was a great experience to have Maestro conduct Symphony 5½. An experience that I shall never forget. Neither the rehearsals, the concert, nor the sessions up at Riverdale. Of course, the rehearsals. I remember one time he stopped the orchestra furiously, and he said, "No, it's not Beethoven, it's not Rossini, it's not Mozart, it is American, it's Gili."
Gili. Gillis, yeah. Your name was Gili.
It was Gili.
American, you see now. He was born in Italy. He was a universal man. He was in America, playing American music. He had become American.
He'd become American in many ways. He was over here so many years. From the time he first came to the Metropolitan, then to the Philharmonic, I think, in 1925, something like that.
Yes, around there.
But from that time on until his death, he was over here most of the time, visiting Italy, of course, but he had traveled the length and breadth of the land, not only as an individual, but with the famous tour of the NBC Symphony and cross-country. So Maestro loved America, as he loved to play and did play American composers. We could go on of his intensity about the American composer. He found, I think, a sort of a significance that he didn't find in European music. And when he did find this significance that he was looking for within the music, he played it, delighted in playing it.
What would you say, Don? You're a man of music. What is the special thing you think that maestro had?
Well, I suppose that one echoes the constancy of the phrase perfection for which he sought. This sense of perfection was a result, I think, of the complete dedication that he had to music, plus the knowledge of, plus the ability to take from the score the sound before the musicians had even had a chance to play it. He knew what he wanted at all times. I think, so many times, Ben, we refer to him as maestro, and we really forget what the word means. It means teacher. And Toscanini, first of all, greatest of all, was the teacher who, having knowledge, wanted to impart it to others so that a perfection of minds could be achieved through a mutual knowledge and respect for the notes which the composer had written.
Thank you, Don. Our intermission guest has been Don Gillis, American composer and producer for many years of the NBC Symphony broadcast with Arturo Toscanini. Our concert of American music continues now as we hear three movements from an American work which Maestro delighted to conduct, the Grand Canyon Suite of Ferdy Grofe. From the suite we hear On the Trail, Painted Desert, and Cloudburst. Arturo Toscanini and the NBC Symphony Orchestra have just been heard in On the Trail, Painted Desert, and Cloudburst from the Grand Canyon Suite of Freddie Grofe. As we salute this 4th of July birthday of our American independence, we can think of no more noble and appropriate way to conclude this broadcast than with Arturo Toscanini's own arrangement of our national anthem, with Jan Pierce, the Westminster Choir, and the NBC Symphony Orchestra. Arturo Toscanini's own orchestral arrangement of our national anthem with Jan Pierce and the Westminster Choir, recorded by Maestro with the NBC Symphony Orchestra, and bringing us to a close in this concert of American music on NBC's new series, Toscanini, the Man Behind the Legend. We cordially invite you to be with us again next week for another in this broadcast series, featuring the music of Arturo Toscanini and the NBC Symphony Orchestra, and word portraits of the maestro brought to you at intermission time by his friends and colleagues. Next week, our music will be the Symphony No. 40 in G minor of Mozart and Prokofiev's Classical Symphony. Our intermission guest will be the distinguished author and critic of the New York Times, Howard Taubman. Script materials for this series are taken from the personal files of the Toscanini family at Riverdale, New York, and the program has been produced under the supervision of Don Gillis. This is Ben Grauer speaking.